I love sound shapes. So I kind of like decompiled the game and tore it apart. So I guess without further ado, let's get into some unused stuff. Goomba Critter Guitar 2. This is a weird version of Goomba Critter Guitar that is non-harmful. Like the harmful one, touching it plays this kalimba sound. This one does not switch directions when hitting an obstacle. An older version can be seen in some test levels that I will bring up later, and this one resembles this harmful variant much more. Monkey Breakout, Monkey Chasing, and Monkey Pitching. When rolling into Monkey Breakout, the player goes inside of the monkey and can control it. Jumping throws you out of the monkey. If you stay in it for too long, it will nod its head and kill the player. Monkey Chasing runs towards the player, grabs it, and runs the opposite direction. Jumping throws you out. When in Monkey Pitching, you can move your joystick to control the way you're thrown out. Spinning the joystick will make the throw more powerful. Danger Jumper Jumping. As the name suggests, this is a harmful entity that jumps. It doesn't do anything else. Pop-Up Tree. This is a Hello World flower that grabs you while you're airborne and then pulls back. This would have been really cool to see in the final version. Checkpoint. There isn't anything necessarily special about the old checkpoint. It has different effects when active, but besides that, the function is practically the same as the normal checkpoint. Boulder Spawner Timed. This is an unused variant of the boulder spawner. The logic unfortunately does not work properly, and when you go directly on the operator's head, you get stuck. Factor Gear Unclimbable. This is a variant of the gear featured in Mechanica that doesn't allow you to stick to it. It resembles one of the background object gears. Corner Pipe. This is a curved pipe that functions practically identical to the normal pipe. You can also connect it to the normal pipes, and it functions properly. Buzzsaw. There is a larger version of the Beyonder saw in the files, however it does not work, so here's what I imagined it would look like. Goomba Critter. Seen in the E3 2011 trailers, this is one of the first harmful entities. All it does is move around. It is buggy on any shape besides circles. Danger Critter. This is another entity from the same time as the last one. It is also supposed to be a harmful entity. It does not work properly, though it does not damage, or unless placed right, will not chase the player as intended. DS Bounce Thing 2 through 6. These are variants of the Bouncy Cube. 2 is a large cube with percussion sounds, 3 is a large circle with no sound, 4 is a wide spinning rectangle with harp sounds, 5 is a short rectangle with synth sounds, and 6 is a small cube with harp sounds. The People Melody Stream. This is an early version of the sparkly areas in Touch the People. This plays an older version of its music and has different physics. Craig Recordable Computer. This is a really buggy version of the corporeal computer with screwed up sprites, and a name that lies. It does not actually have recording abilities. Rolling Car. This is a scrapped car that it seems to be based off a cassette player. The only reason I think this was scrapped was because the car has a tendency to fall over easily. Call-in Bouncy Vehicle. Another scrapped vehicle. This is a simple bouncy ball that the player can go in. Unstickying makes the ball bounce faster and lower. This appears to be a circle that either was a planned icon for the bouncy vehicle from before, or could have been some other entity that would bounce the player. These are scrapped variants of the Speaking Fire Pits in cities. This seems to be some sort of entity that would fire something through walls. My best guess as to what this is an early version of the Screw Shooter from Beyonder. This must have just been a simple rotating cube or rectangle, not sure what more I can say for it. All of these are icons of removed entities from around E3 2011. Some of these are recognizable objects from the E3 2011 gameplay video, as well as in some thumbnails for levels of that time. This is an early version featuring different notes and slightly different layouts from the modern version. This one's very similar to the previous early version, however the music is also different. There are no loop notes. There's also some minimal layout differences. This version of Sparkle Darkle is not too different from the final version, however there are no loop notes, some palettes are different, and there's some differences in layout. The spawn starts somewhere in the middle of the level, and it is impossible to continue through the level without cheating or modifying it. Palettes are different, however the layout is fairly close to the modern version. This is a very different version of Sneak and Deke featuring different music, a drastically different layout, and the unused pop-up tree entity. This level is also featured on a gameplay video from 2011. This version of Rowdy Cloudy has a light sky rather than dark. There are no loop notes and it has been transposed down. Layout has small differences compared to the modern version. This version of Personnel has some large differences such as the palette, however the layout of the level is similar to the modern version, albeit the primitiveness. This version of Research and Development is drastically different from the modern day version in a lot of sections. Color palette is different and layout differs quite a bit. It is incompletable without cheats or modification. This is a more polished version of the previous level, however still quite different from the modern level and also incompletable without cheats or modification. This version of Purgatory is similar in some aspects, however layout and palette are both pretty different. This level isn't completable without cheats or modification. This Purgatory is much closer to the final version, with the layout being similar, although the music is slowed down and a full octave lower, as well as there being palette differences. This version is actually completable without any cheats or modifications. The previous versions of Purgatory at least resembled the layout of the final version, but this one does not at all. This version feels like a spin-off of Purgatory. Almost everything about it is different compared to the final version. Unfortunately, this level was unable to be loaded, probably because of some sort of entity that has faulty code. This level may be fixable in the future, but as of right now, it is inaccessible. This Event Horizon version has some fairly different scenes, like the start, but some parts resemble the final. The color palette is quite different, and the ending is probably the most different thing of all. This version resembles the final much more with color palette, however, still shares some resemblance with the previous earlier version in layout. This version of Hypoglacia is almost identical to the final version, with the exception of some very minor differences, the lack of loop notes, and the ending. This version is nearly identical to the previous, however it has loop notes and some tiny changes. The layout and palette is completely identical, and from a glance it's very hard to tell which one it is unless you know that the XML version does not have loop notes. This level was also featured during E3 2012. The early version of Thermogenica is fairly close to the final, however differs in some areas in palette and layout. The ending is, in my opinion, a lot cooler than the modern versions. This version of Mechanica closely resembles the final, however it is missing some of the loop notes from the final and has somewhat of a different layout, and in some parts a different palette. The ending is significantly different and for whatever reason contains some loop notes from cities. This version is not completable without cheats or modification, especially since the goal is out of bounds. This version is nearly identical to the previous one, however loop notes are present and the ending is shorter and completable. The start of this Mechanica version is really weird, filled with seemingly random objects, and is a mess. The rest of it though features the same layout as the previous levels, but with different notes. The ending is nearly identical to the previous version, but it has a different palette for the final screen. This level has a similar start to the previous, but in the actual Mechanica part, there are random sprites plastered throughout the level and the color palette is screwed up. The notes are the same as in the previous level. The goal is not present at the end of this level. The main part of this level is the same as the first three, however this version has unique notes, and the ending is the same as the previous levels. This early level is very similar to the final version, however there are some small differences. There are no loop notes, and the jumping entities are not positioned correctly. This one's basically the same as the previous version, however there are loop notes, but there are also even more differences. The jumping entities are also not positioned correctly here. This version of Extraterrestria appears to be very early. Despite how bare bones this version looks, it still is completable. The layout of the level is basically the same as the modern version. This Disasteroids version is a bit bare bones, but is fairly similar to the final. The spawn is different, as well as the palette. Also, it's incompletable without cheats or modifications. This is the only campaign level that doesn't have at least one loadable early level, and no matter what I've tried, I cannot get it onto a file so I can decompile it and figure out why it does not work properly. The only old version of Galaxinoids I've been able to find is on a few videos from E3 2012 showing gameplay of an early version of Galaxinoids. This is probably how the level looks, but something in it will not load and causes a crash. This version of Invaderoids is nearly identical to the final, with the exception of the palette. Also, there's this poorly made recreation of the dead mouse head object, most likely as a placeholder. This seems to be a later version, near identical to the previous version of Invaderoids, except for the palette and this screen, where they have the dead mouse face objects actually added in. This is a barebones version of the modern Breakanoids, however, its layout is close to the final. The palette is quite different than in the final, however. Also, I found some cool stuff out of bounds, including this entity that I didn't even know about. This early version of cities has some fairly large differences, but mostly follows the layout of the modern version. It is not completable without cheats or modifications due to the wrong placement of some objects. This early version of Touch of People has large differences in the palette, as well as in the layout besides the ending. The older Melody Stream entity is used in this one, and honestly, I like the full uncut version of that looping sound better, although the physics of the new Melody Stream are better. This level is impossible to complete without cheats or modification because of the placement of pipes being wrong. This is a very bare-bones version of Spiral Staircase, however, notes are the same, and so is the general layout. For some reason, this early version is stupidly hard, but despite that, it is actually completable. Finally done with levels. For the campaign. The first level from the E3 2011 footage. It features the aforementioned Goomba critter and also what I believe is Goomba Square, which isn't in the game files anymore and so does not appear in the modern version of the game. The second E3 2011 level. The in-game version's palette is different, but that's probably because it was replaced after a long time. Almost all of the entities are missing in this level since a good chunk of them don't exist in the files. The third E3 2011 level. Unfortunately, due to the Goomba Critter's bugged movement code, they get stuck in the way and make this level impossible to complete without cheats or modification. The last E3 2011 level. This is no longer in the game's files, so unfortunately I cannot play this one. I figured out the file name of the level because of an old campaign level list. A screenshot of this level was used as a placeholder for the loading screens at some point. This is a test level for cities. Early versions of entities such as Goomba Critter Guitar 2 are used to play loops, as loop notes most likely weren't implemented at this time. You know, I'm just gonna put it out here. They could have probably shortened Touch the People in a better way, like they could have done the people, which they've already done before. Yeah, I don't really know what the developers were thinking here. This is basically the same thing as the previous level, but for Touch the People. There's an early version of the Planet Face entity from Brown and Cloudy present in this level. Also, check out this early version of the song here. This is a test level for Dead Mouse Notes with a couple entities from Decade. This is the same thing as the previous level, but with different notes. Nothing too special. Test level for Hypoglacia's notes. This appears to have similar notes to colonize.xml.z. There are also various objects from the level placed on one screen. A fifth Hello World level was planned at some point. Unfortunately, vic5.xml.z crashes when loading, probably from some unused entity that I've yet to figure out, but vic5 ideas doesn't, so that one will have to do. Although simple, it has some features reminiscent of Hills and Spills and features entities introduced from earlier levels in Hello World. There are no loop notes, but this level probably started being made before loop notes were even a thing. Anyways, for what the state of this one is, it's pretty cool. I would sometime like to figure out what is causing Vic5 to crash, but I'm not sure right now, and it's difficult to find that out because debugging XML levels is stupidly difficult. This was going to be the level for the scrapped rolling car, however because the vehicle was scrapped, so was this level. This level was very close to completion and must have probably been scrapped last minute, along with the car, unfortunately. In the files, there is a leftover old thumbnail of an early car DLC level. This level is not actually in the files, but the remnant of it being this thumbnail is. This is probably the only living screenshot of this level. This is some sort of test level, not sure what this is for though. The only reason this is categorized differently from the other test levels is because of just how different it is. Very simply put, this is an early version of the campaign tutorial. Not much else to say. This is a really cool concept for a level, and I would have loved to see this in the final game. The moving rectangles and cubes are primarily used here. The color palette compared to the thumbnails has changed, however it still looks decent for the level. This level is full of random test sprites, but despite that it's playable. The palette is definitely off compared to the thumbnail though. This is a huge level with a lot of pipes, areas, and all sorts of stuff. I am not sure if it is possible to get all of the notes, but it is at the very least possible to complete. This is a small level with a few cubes, notes, and other stuff. Not sure if there's a goal anywhere. Looking at the thumbnail, this would have been a cool level, but the palette is all wrong and the background sprites are also all wrong. This is a car level that was probably used for testing the old car before it was updated and transformed into a DLC. Not completable, and I have no idea where the goal is. This is a small level with a bunch of screwed up background sprites. That's all. There's nothing else to this level. Really cool level idea where you go up a tube with bubbles. Unfortunately, past a certain screen, the game just crashes. Okay, now we're finally done with the levels. Sort of. This album must have been used for testing the car DLC before it released. Here are the levels we'll look at. This is just simply an early version of Hard Drive, but with a different color palette. This is essentially the exact same thing as the previous level, except there are a few layout differences, and all of the screens have the same gray palette. I don't know what MRW would have meant here, but there's only one important level we'll look at, since the other two are clones of Extraterrestia. This is a short level that is corporeal themed. It's simple, but for an unused level, not that bad. You might have noticed in some of these levels I can fly. This is a built-in debug feature that activates from a controller button combination, but unfortunately this isn't possible to enable on unmodded real hardware. Another debug thing I found is this menu, opening with a different controller combo. There are a few options for dumping assets, checking memory stats, setting and resetting values or unlockable stuff, and also a button to just complete a level.
Okay, roll back, come on.
Here are some remnants of the older spawn and goal sprites. Here's an old player icon. This is a screenshot of the early multiplayer menu featuring levels from E3 2011. Here's a scrapped sprite that potentially could have been the chimney object from Cities. This is another Cities related image, an early mockup with the spiderweb object. Here's an early icon for the jumping entity from Beyonder. On this video from E3 2012, there's an early icon of the spawn as well as the end goal. These three videos show development footage of Cities. Here's an E3 2012 video showing early gameplay of various levels. So I think that'll be it for the images, videos, and debug content, as well as the entire video. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.